The name of the book is Can't Knock the Hustle: Inside the Season of Protest, Pandemic, and Progress with the Brooklyn Nets Superstars of Tomorrow. It is available now. And Matt, thank you for making time for us again, because you also wrote this story for Rolling Stone that has everybody talking about Kyrie Irving today. Can you take us through what made this story happen, what you started hearing, and just take us through the reporting on this?
Well, thanks for having me back aboard the pirate ship, Dan. Just before we get started, if I may, I'd like to read a few facts, just because this is an important conversation for people who care about sanity. Fact A, the Moderna vaccine, according to a study published last week in the New England Journal of Medicine, has a real-world efficacy rate in preventing symptomatic illness of 98.3%. Fact B, the Pfizer vaccine is 88.3% effective, according to the same study. Fact C, both of these things are true if you actually take the vaccine. And fact D, Kyrie Irving said in 2017 about satellites, I guess, that, quote, when I started actually doing research on my own and figuring out that there is no real picture of Earth, not one real picture of Earth, and we haven't been back to the moon since 1961 or 1969, it becomes like conspiracy too, end quote, which, Dan, is not in and of itself actually really a fact whatsoever. But this stuff, got me thinking. I've been deep inside Kyrie world for a long time, but the more and more I wondered, with this New York City law now and in San Francisco, that guys basically have to get the vax, right? It's like you can't hide in this kind of secret society of anti-vaxxers anymore. And so America's most progressive cities kind of bailed out America's most progressive league by saying Hooper's got to get vaxxed. So of course, Kyrie, this kind of humanitarian provocateur influencer, he's going to test the bounds of the NBA and science and the law by just potentially refusing to play games here in Brooklyn. So I started tapping all my sources from the book, at least the ones who would still fucking talk to me, and they just kind of ran their mouths.
Well, let's backtrack for a second. You've lost a lot of sources because of the book, because I've seen that Kevin Durant hasn't denied anything that was in the book. You basically reported, there was a lot of reporting in the book, but that the Nets run that organization, that those players, right, that Durant and Kyrie run that organization. That was the bombshell, although it was much more thorough than that, and there was much more reporting. What's the blowback and the fallout been? I
think they're scared. They've been lucky that nobody had to talk until media day on Monday. And I didn't really trust anybody to have to answer for that stuff several months later. And this was the new stuff that mattered to the conversation. Kyrie's people have blown me off. And KD's friends have said, after I appeared on your guys' show before, and we talked about them smoking weed or whatever, like, is this actually fucking real? Or like, stay away from me. I think that's understandable. Some of them maybe didn't know what they were getting into with kind of stuff being always on the record with me. But that didn't stop me from going back to folks who I didn't want to set them up to reveal their true selves, but this vaccine thing matters. And I think Kyrie has always been pretty out there with a lot of his beliefs. He's a good guy too, for sure. But I guess I was replaced at Nets Media Day on Monday by David Letterman. Do you see him out there?
Yes. It was painful. It was painful. It was uncomfortable.
But Katie was like, I guess they'll let anyone in here. So anyone but me, I guess.
Did you at all feel threatened?
No. Just because it's bodyguards saying they're going to stop talking to you doesn't mean they're going to do anything. I don't feel welcome. We'll see if they let me in the building. And certainly fans have ganged up on me and think I'm some, liar with an agenda out to get KD and Kyrie. But, these are public figures, and they're now in the middle of a major public health crisis. And that's what this is about, right? These guys are role models. And that's what my book was about, is the limitations of influence. And we're seeing role models being put to the test once again.
Can you tell the audience, Matt, for those who haven't read the article, Kyrie Irving's aunt and her viewpoints and what she's talking about? Because I hadn't seen her quoted before.
Kooky Aunt Tyke does a lot of good for the world. She runs Kyrie's foundation, water security in Africa, camps for kids. Kyrie does a lot of good too. without taking credit for it. But man, she just kind of went off the deep end, to be honest. And she's out here talking about, quote, Dr. Falsey, and how, you can't put things in your body, and how Kyrie is going to figure this out as it comes with the vaccines. She says you might have to sit on the sideline, you might not be in the arena. And she said if it's that freaking important to get a vaccine that hell, it's still not preventing the COVID, which we know that it is, then I'd rather them work it out that way than say, hey, if you don't get the vaccine, then you can't be part of the franchise that you fucking helped build. So I think she revealed, and she's definitely one of the closer people in his, increasingly tight circle who is definitely absolutely familiar with his thinking, but her thinking is full of misinformation. And she talked about that. She went off on that. And I just kind of let her talk. And similar to my phone call to Jonathan Isaac, who, as we know, was the guy who stood up when everyone took a knee during the anthem in the bubble. And I gave him every chance to explain himself too. And he just went off about how he'd stand for the anthem again, about how he doesn't understand why if you're vaccinated, you still have to wear masks in some places. I almost wanted to interrupt him and be like, dude, it's about not killing people. But I tried to let him say his piece and present it as he said it. And he's entitled to his opinion and his religious freedom. But, on Monday, after the article kind of starts going around a lot, he's tweeting about my story. And he sounds like Trump. He's like, true journalism is dying. I believe it is your God-given right to decide if taking the vaccine is right for you, period. More to follow. Which, doesn't that kind of negate the whole point of saying period, to say more to follow? Anyway.
Your reporting on this has been something that has caused a conversation throughout sports. We were talking before you came on about this movement. 10% is more vaccinated than the country, having only 10% of your league not vaccinated, but it pales compared to the WNBA. We were talking about how disposable the bodies are in football or the WNBA. What's happening here with power and player empowerment and Kyrie knowing that he can get away with just about anything because they run that team and they're an economy around that team. So he's pushing against all these boundaries as this polarizing weirdo, basketball icon.
Well, he's certainly not taking this as a religious exemption as New York lets you apply for. And, he's a practicing Christian and Muslim and reconnected with his Sioux tribe recently, as I detail in the Rolling Stone story. But I think he also reveals how the Hoopers are just sick of testing. They don't always trust the science clearly, but if they don't want to have to get vaxxed, they don't want to get tested on their off days. There's a sticking point in the negotiations, which are still ongoing between the PA, the Players Union and the league, that these guys want to be able to freely go to indoor activities such as lounges and nightclubs. Which is a league source said that's always the last sticking point. But I think it's not just Kyrie, Dan. Think about some of these other faces of the league. A league source told me that they've been having trouble getting superstars to participate in public service campaigns, public PSAs for the vaccine to fans. If you think about Black Americans continue to be the slowest to adopt the vaccine, according to demographics measured by the CDC. But think about Giannis. Giannis's brother went into the COVID protocol before Game 5 of the finals. You're telling me that Giannis wasn't a, quote, close contact of him? They hug it out every 5 minutes. And Giannis said, did Giannis say whether he was vaccinated back then? I know he did a media day, but I don't believe so. He is vaccinated now. But once again, there are certain players, Dan, for whom the NBA is just going to look the other way. Science is big, player health is paramount, but, the coin don't lie. And let's not forget about LeBron, guys. I don't want to totally go there, but we all remember when he was partying maskless with Drake and Michael B. Jordan in May. And LeBron says it's about me and my family, personal choice, kind of in line with his usual, I'm not educated enough, evasive answer. And if you remember, it forced the head communications officer of the NBA to put out this very awkward clarifying statement about LeBron attended an outdoor event. But it said under current NBA rules, vaccinated players are permitted to engage in outside activities. It never said LeBron is vaccinated. LeBron never said he's vaccinated. Was he really vaccinated? Is he now because he wants to be, or because LeBron Inc. and Rob Pelinka didn't want to get caught and just want to get through this? I think that's the limits of personal player empowerment here.
What?
Is Kyrie wants to be Kyrie, and KD wants to be KD. Harden wants to be Harden. But at some point, it's like KD's got to be, yo, bro, get the shot. We got to play. And I think we'll see. I mean, Kyrie is an acid test for whether he's really willing to go there and whether the NBA is going to stop influencing on this particular issue for as progressive as they've been on everything else.
The reporting on this from Vince Goodwill is that KD will get him to get vaccinated before this is done. But I'd like to play the sound for the audience. You called her the kooky aunt. Is that the adjective that you used, kooky?
She does a lot of good for the world in running Kyrie's Family Foundation. But man, she just jumped off the deep end, and it didn't surprise me.
Let's play that sound for the audience so that they can hear her in her own words.
There can be some kind of formula where the NBA and the players can kind of come to this agreement where it's like, okay, well, we won't play the full 25 games. Okay, because you guys, obviously, in order for us to do that, we must have this vaccination, but we're not getting the vaccination. So what does it look like if we play at least 15 or 10 of these games? And then they can figure out what that looks like, right? If it's that freaking important to get a vaccine, that hell, it's still not preventing the COVID. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If that's something that has to be done, then I'd rather them work it out that way than to say, hey, if you don't get the vaccine, you can't be a part of the franchise that you helped build. Excuse my French.
Matt, what do you think the NBA should do?
Well, to be clear, Stugotz, when I put this to the NBA, to some of their most high-ranking medical officials, there is no deal. New York City law requires players to be vaccinated to play home games at the Barclays Center. The Knicks, of all teams, are 100% vaccinated. But the league is in a bind. And they told me, these top medical officers told me, you know, if New York City says this isn't cool, we have to abide by the law. And so it's part of a lot of the eye rolling here. But if Kyrie wants to pull a kind of anti-Kaepernick stand for what he sees as his personal freedom and be a, I guess, role model for vaccine deniers, they can't do anything. The league is facing this pressure from the union, which is one of America's strongest unions. And they are just 100% out on the league's 100% desire to get these guys vaccinated, the league's 100% belief in science. And this is really a sticking point. This is really a rubber meeting the road kind of
But the union can't set the precedent, Matt. The union cannot set the precedent of allowing the league to infiltrate their their membership's body, physical body, almost under any circumstances, right? You just can't set that as the precedent. This isn't even that hard to understand, is it?
Well, it's hard to understand how some of these conversations with the players' union, going back to the beginning of these negotiations, were, I don't want to say agenda setting was going on with the anti-vaxxers, but these guys were heard. They were given a fair shake. And these are people who explore, or at least group chat about some pretty crazy shit. And the CDC, again, reminded everyone on Tuesday that the messenger RNA from the vaccine is, quote, present in the body for a short time and is not incorporated, nor does it alter an individual's genetic material, which some people out there on the internet believe. And the young people in the NBA read the internet. And so I don't think it's a stretch to say that some of this out there thinking defines some of the league's other parameters for negotiation, including testing on off days and beyond. I mean, there is no wiggle room coming at all from the PA, and the league is just trying to send out its kind of testing nerds as best as it can. And, you know, they've got monitoring in place, but they can't really punish these guys for ignoring science.
Matt, is what's happening here just the QAnon internet rot brain stuff that is happening when people go down these conspiracy theory holes? Like, is that you're going to get a certain any membership of any kind, you're going to find some people who have this internet rot brain?
I mean, I think there's something to be said for the preciousness of bodies. These guys' bodies are their livelihoods, but they also have top medical professionals around them all day to make sure that they're as healthy as freaking possible, because there's billions of dollars at stake. Sure, young people go down rabbit holes. It's happening in the NFL. forged vax IDs are apparently happening in the NFL, which the NBA told me they would hunt down and sweep state databases for if it happened in the NBA. But yeah, I think it's a bit of the groupthink of the NBA. I mean, I remember this passage in my book. It's right up in the front. It was kind of scary to think. It was like, okay, I was setting up the flat earth stuff. And then I asked Instagram, does Kyrie have like more engagement on Instagram than Trump? This is when Trump was still allowed on Instagram. And they were like, yeah, he does. And I talked to the head of Instagram and he's saying, it's okay. It's actually good for fans to see, famous people who disagree with common thinking. And then your average fan will find out who they find authentic and engage with them. And then like the next paragraph in my book is talking to this 7th grader from Kyrie's old middle school, the star of the basketball team. And he's like, yeah, I love everything Kyrie posts, even the weird stuff. And so I just worry about that cycle of internet misinformation meets celebrity, really at this moment, building up to something potentially dangerous.
Matt, knowing the dynamic of the Nets as you do, how do you see this playing out? Because it's unfathomable to me that he might actually sit out the team's home games, but yet he seems pretty resolute on this. How would you imagine it's going to play out?
Well, he claims there's a plan and it will all come out in due time, which I buy. I think he wants it to be on his own terms, on his own platform. Joe Tsai, the owner of the Nets, has to be pretty frustrated. Sean Marks, the GM of the Nets, has, as I reported in my book, flouted COVID protocols before. I don't think it would be out of the realm of possibility for Kyrie to put together some of his religious elements, which he has been expanding over the years. He recently got a tribal ID from the Sioux Reservation at Standing Rock. I mean, I'm not saying he's going to fake his way into this or backdoor his way in through some loophole, but it's kind of either that, don't play, or give in to KD guilt tripping him to do this to win a championship. But we've seen, like, Kyrie doesn't give a shit about skipping games or losing money. Last season, after the Capitol riot, he just ditches the team. And there's some other family stuff involved, apparently, like spiritual, mental break from everything. And he was pissed off about the cop who shot Jacob Blake getting off. But then he just comes back, like, kind of like nothing happened and claims he's devoted to his team, which he claims now. But he also ducked a question at Media Day like 3 or 4 times about this. But then there was one from like the local sports dude asking a kind of layup question, like, how do you feel about the fans? Like, are you disappointing them? And he's like, they're for my teammates and my followers who care about me, my tribe off the court. So I don't know, Greg. It's like, does he really care about pleasing people, or does he feel like, put upon by the system of the man and Joe Tsai making millions of dollars off of his precious black body? That's fair for him to decide, but I don't know what the hell that plan is. And I hope for the Nets championship's sake that it makes a little more sense than things with Kyrie tend to do.
A tweeter writes in, I've been listening since the beginning of this show on local Miami radio. More and more, I am embarrassed by how much of a boomer Dan is now. Kyrie is an adult, not a child. He's allowed to do what he wants with his body without anyone questioning it. Unvaccinated does not equal sick. WTF is wrong with you people? I'm ashamed of this show. They used to see through the bullshit in society.
He's that guy.
Matt, I've got some Bomani Jones criticisms of your article. I don't know if you have seen this or not, but
I just saw him tweet about it. I didn't listen to his show. I love Bomani.
Claiming the anti-vaxxers have taken over the league, a league that's 90% vaccinated. How can you claim that it's been taken over when it's only 10% of the populace?
The NBA is getting there. They're down to, I think, from 60 to 50, maybe under 40 guys we're talking about unvaccinated. I think it's that they speak almost rebelliously for this, I don't want to call it silent majority because that's got kind of a loaded term, but there are more guys who are vaccinated who also feel this way, but they are sucking it up and literally taking one for the team. I don't want to be that guy who claims to understand the nuances of Black history. I've read up on Tuskegee and all that, but there's also a fine line between an excuse and an abdication of your influence. And I was on MSNBC with our friend Jamel last night, and she was saying that these guys need to stop trusting YouTube. Brad Beal should not be out here being the spokesman for personal freedom. Why is he an expert on this stuff? Why is Bradley Beal, he's saying, some of these guys say, Kevin Durant says, who is this guy to know anything about hooping who's never played it beyond JV in his life or whatever? But who are these guys to be medical experts just because they're really in shape and have been surrounded by medical experts? And so I totally respect what Bomani's saying, and don't want to overvalue these kind of crazy guys and give too much airspace to like microchip implantation theories. But I think this has been kind of an open secret that it's a bigger deal in this league. And look, it might just be that the NBA, for all of the influence they've had and all the good that they've done for progressive causes, that this is just one that they're not going to lead on.
You can find anyone other than Kareem to make the strong pro-vaccine stance?
I was and still I'm trying to speak with Damian Lillard, who I thought was an adult in the room for sure, when he spoke at Media Day and just said, this is going to save lives. I got the flu shot when I was a kid. I don't know shit about the flu shot. I think Kareem is incredible. I've known him for quite some time and edited his writing in the past. And do any of you guys watch that show, Dave, on FX? There's this episode where the main character, this white rapper, who writes a song kind of appropriating Kareem. And then, this isn't a spoiler, but he ends up over at Kareem's house where, let's just say, the rest of us can only hope to be sitting in finely designed mansions someday, sipping like tea in the den by the laptop. But he's like pondering this essay and, trolling the shit out of conservative America with such calm and such grace, such wisdom. He and Bill Russell, the rest of us should all just stop tweeting and listen to them, I think. But there are other adults in the room. Enes Kanter's been great on this stuff, not afraid to call a spade a spade. And the best thing guys like, the adults in the room can do is educate on the level to their teammates and say, yo, this isn't just safe for you and my grandfather and the ref and the coach who's maybe has some underlying condition, but this is good for our team. Like, you saw KD miss a bunch of games last year because he was exposed to someone, I don't know if it was an entourage or whatever, who, was a close contact, similar to what I strongly believe that Giannis was during the finals. And if the NBA takes Giannis out of that game for game 5, 6, whatever of the NBA finals because his brother had COVID, it changes the entire balance of the league. And so this is relevant. This is not just personal freedom. We're talking basketball questions now.
Matt, thank you for being on with us. Appreciate the reporting. Telling the audience again, can't knock the hustle inside the season of protest, pandemic, and progress with the Brooklyn Nets Superstars of Tomorrow is available now. And it's an unusual book. This access is really unusual. It's an unfiltered look into that Nets team that you'll find fascinating if it stays together. Thank you, Matt.
Appreciate you guys.
Thanks, man.